Hey everybody, hope you guys had a nice week and nice getting closer to the weekend. So this is our fifth Zoom meeting, and tonight basically we're just going to do what we normally do. Any questions that you guys might have about assignments or anything that's coming up, I'll walk you through some of the things that we have due, and then hopefully we'll have some time tonight to talk a little bit about assessment and feedback. So let's start off with, do you guys have any questions for me tonight?
Yes, I have a question. On one, yeah, I have a question. Can you hear me?
Okay, then without further ado, let me go ahead. Give me just 1 second here, and let me go ahead and I'll share my screen.
Miss Tracy. Miss Tracy.
Somebody has a question, Miss Johnson.
Can you hear me?
And we'll talk a little bit about the upcoming assignments. Sorry, it always does this to me. I log in right before class and I think everything's good to go, and then it of course logs me back out. Okay, so let me get to our week here. Sorry guys, like I said, every time I do this, it logs me out, never fails. Yeah, is there somebody I'm trying to ask a question?
Oh, can you hear us, Miss
If
Johnson?
you are, just unmute yourself.
She is.
I did unmute myself. Can you hear me?
Okay, why can't I hear anybody? Hang on, guys. Let me see what's going on. My speakers are on. Hang on 1 second.
How about now? Can you hear us?
Yes, finally. Thank you. Sorry.
Okay, go ahead.
All right. Sorry. Okay. Can you hear me, Miss Johnson? Okay. So my question was about one of the slide questions that I couldn't figure out what it really meant to understand how to answer it. So I wanted to know if you could maybe rephrase it. It was number 7, determine which performance challenges will focus improvement activities for the coming year. Could you just explain that a little bit more?
Yeah, unfortunately you cut out on me there for just a second. So do you mind rereading the question?
Okay, it was determine which performance challenges will focus improvement activities for the coming year.
Okay, yeah, it basically in a nutshell, if we were to look at any particular school, we're going to find there's 20 things that we need to work on. Well, it's not effective to work on 20 things. So what I would do is just pick the one that you think is going to be the most important, and that's going to be the one that's going to drive your efforts that year. So let's say that you've got problems in reading and in math, and you decide we're really going to focus on 3rd grade math. That's going to be our most important area that we want to look at. Does that help?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah. So I have a question.
Sure.
So I'm trying to finish up this data analysis, and there's 2 questions I have. The gathering and organizing of data.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not clear on what I should be, populating here, nor am I clear on prioritizing concerns, and in parentheses, performance challenges. I'm not clear on either of those. Okay, I looked at your video 3, 4, 5 times, and maybe it might be me, but I mean, you're very proficient at this since you've been doing it for 30 years, but not me. So can you give me an exemplar on those 2 areas?
Yeah, let me hang on 1 second. I'm trying to find the template here. Just 1 second. Let me share my screen with you guys. Okay, so we're talking about Okay, so we talked about this one, how to rate yourself. So you're going to pull a data set. You can get your data from anywhere. It can be something that you find at your own school. It might be on your school's website. It could be that you don't have a data set. So I've provided you guys with several. There's one from a Texas elementary school. There's one from a middle school. You can choose to use those if you want to. So what you're going to do is you're going to look at those data sets. Now, depending on what you choose, you may or may not have some of this information. So for example, if I've chosen to look at the Texas elementary school, and in that particular data packet, there's math and reading and all these kinds of data indicators, attendance, discipline referrals, you name it. So what you're going to be doing is you're going to go through and you're going to look at your data reports, and then you're going to begin to fill this in based on that data report. So for example, if your data report gives you academic growth information, so it may tell you that in 2020 that you had a 30% passing rate in math. And in 2019, you only had a 15%. So what you're going to put there for academic growth would simply be that, math scores grew by 15%. And how do you know that? You can just put data report. Okay. If you don't have that kind of information, that's fine. Just put not applicable. Because like I said, some of you are focusing on social studies, for example. So, you may have to go in and just put a lot of NAs here. Then when you talk about each one of these, so again, this is pretty global, okay? So if I'm looking at math overall for third grade, I can look at the academic growth, I can look at their actual achievement results, which would be that 30% of my third graders passed the math test. Then some data reports, not all, will break it down for you even more specifically. So they may say that only 5% of your third graders passed the test in math on perimeter. So that's what I would put here. I would list what particular content strand that is. So in this case, it would be perimeter. What was the achievement rate? 5%. If you know it for the group here where it talks about disaggregated group achievement, it's basically the same thing. These are basically the same unless we really wanted to go and do a deep dive analysis and go student by student. But you guys probably don't have access to that data. And even if you did, it's not something we're going to go into. So again, you're just going, like I said, you're going to look at growth, you're going to look at absolute achievement, you're going to look at it by content and by strand. You really don't have to worry about these two right here, the group achievement or the group growth, because like I said, we're not doing a deep data dig right now into all this and go student by student. This is just, like I said, to get you guys kind of in there and fooling around with the data so you understand it.
Yeah, so we won't have the data by standard. You're talking about the school standards for the state, correct?
Right. You may or may not. Like I said, depending on what data you use. I know when I was in Texas breaks theirs down by content strand or by objective, by state standard, the text. So we almost always had this one here, achievement by standard or content strand, but a lot of states aren't doing that. And particularly this year, it's different, guys, because of COVID, and we didn't do the same kind of testing we normally did and all of that. So this is going to be a little bit less useful to you than it may have been in previous years. So it's fine just to put NA, guys. I'm not going to get too concerned.
But Ms. Johnson, if they choose something like Dibbles or STAR or LEAP test scores, or anything like that, then they should have at least some results where they could break that down, right? So like for Dibbles, they could break down like I did. I mean, and I don't mind showing on my chart too that's already filled out if need be, but they could do that with STAR and stuff too, right? They could take the STAR test, and the STAR test breaks down the student skill. It even gives you a report that shows you like tiny little graphs for each standard, which students in the classes or the group, whatever you chose, that scored, like in the high, medium, or low, or whatever it is categories. And same thing for LEAP scores, if they're looking at past LEAP scores, which the administration would have access to if they don't. But that would be the same thing that they could do there, right?
Yes, yeah, absolutely. And like I said, a lot of districts, a lot of schools and states break their data down that way. If you're still really stuck, you can always go to the, what's it called? What Works Network or Network or something.
Yeah. Well, I'm actually using what my state uses, which is called PARC, and they don't, the categories that you list are not there. So we will have some NA situations then.
And you guys can also change my categories too. Like I said, I just put what's kind of the standard.
Right.
And if you're looking at, for example, career education data, or I've been reading grants here lately. So like we've been looking a lot at their persistence rates in high school and stuff like that. So like I say, you can change these headers, guys. It doesn't have to be.
Okay, because the reading and writing, that's combined in what they call English language arts literacy.
Right.
So it's yeah, okay. All right.
Yeah. So like I said, you can change the headers. We're not married to those. Okay.
Okay. All right.
And like I said, when we talk about prioritizing concerns, again, we've got all this data. So how do we know what's going to be the most important for us to work on? Well, you have to do some prioritization to be able to do that. So you're just going to tell me, who are we going to prioritize performance concerns around? Maybe it's the third graders in math. When are we going to do this? And what are the materials and stuff we're going to use to do that? Okay.
Okay.
Does that help?
Yeah, that does help. And
then down here in number 6, you're going to just give me an explanation of how you prioritized a particular concern.
Yeah, I've already done that. So, and a question about the PowerPoint. In the directions, it says the first slide should say about the members and the students. Am I reading that correctly in your directions?
Yeah, and what I'm talking about there is tell me what students you're looking at. Are you looking at third graders? Are you looking at ninth graders? Are you looking at just the
all right,
the males?
That makes more sense then, because I was I was thinking that, never mind.
That's okay.
That makes sense.
Don't make this more complicated than it is. Okay.
Well,
like I said,
I'm trying not to, but it's a very detailed analysis, and I'm trying to make sure I'm trying to work with all the information there, because I may be using it one day.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That's the intent. Okay, any other questions, guys?
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
I have a question. It says that we should include a reference list. So, I mean, if that's not APA style references necessarily, but just like what data we used.
Yeah, just tell me where you got your data from, and it may be that it's posted on your district's website. It may be that you got it from the National What Works Clearinghouse. It's from your school improvement plan. That's basically what we're talking about for references in this one. It's not the same as like if you're doing an essay and you're citing particular research or whatever. So yeah, it's pretty simple this time.
I'm sorry to be so chatty tonight, but
that's okay.
I just really need your assistance. So
sure.
My next question is this particular assignment, I wish that I would have done it in a group with a group, because it was kind of detailed. It's
pretty intense. Yeah, it is. That's why I give you the option of a group.
So my question is that the next one we could have, you said we can utilize a group. Is my only concerns with groups is that when we break up the work as to who's going to do what, and my concern is that if I do what I committed to do, and we have 4 people working on it, and maybe someone had some difficulty doing what they were assigned, how does that come out in terms of the grade that I will get? Because if we committed, 4 people commit, and we have 4 different sections and someone doesn't carry their weight, of which I'm sure that wouldn't happen in this class. But if that happened,
Zoom. That's why you Zoom your people. You put them on a schedule, and then you Zoom them, and you make sure that everybody's on point for what
Yeah.
they were supposed to accomplish. So like I worked with a group in Miss Johnson's last class for our project, and we met like 4 times before the project was due. And the first time we went through and we decided, okay, you're going to do blank, 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 blank. And then I was like, okay, we're going to meet again this time, this time, this time. And you need to have this done by this day. You need to have this done by this day. So if they were having a problem, we could text or we could tell each other at the next meeting. So we didn't get to the end and know right at the end that someone was having a problem.
Yeah, that in theory, that sounds really good.
I will tell you, in all the times that I used to require group work, I quit requiring it because some people just could not seem to handle, doing it virtually. Although I think we've gotten really good here in the last year with virtual stuff. But I've only had a problem one time with the group, and all you have to do is email me and say, hey, these are the people in our group. So and so is not doing their part. And so I just did not grade that particular section for the rest of the group members. And the person who didn't do their part got the appropriate grade accordingly. It's just like, you would handle it in a classroom. I mean, if you do group work and you have a team member who's not doing their part, you deal with it and move on.
Yeah. When I hand out group assignments, whatever the students are assigned, if whoever, doesn't meet their expectation, then they get the appropriate grade.
Right. Yeah. And I just tell people to just leave their name off the submission. Yeah. Real simple. Just, and then it's really clear. But yeah, just email me or, or whatever, and we'll work through it. Like I said, I've only had that happen the one time. And gosh, I've probably taught, I can't tell you how many times I've taught group assignment classes at LSUS. It's been a bunch.
Okay. All right. Well, I promise I want you to ask you any more questions for the next 60 seconds. Okay?
That's fine. That's good. We can do that.
All right.
Okay, let's talk about the midterm. Yes, I will tell you my case studies are intense, but they are intense by design because at the end of the class, I want you to, if you're going to be taking a principal certification test, I want you to not only do well, I want you to soar through it. But more importantly, too, I want you to understand really what it is that we have to do if we're going to effectively use data to move and drive instruction. And more research is coming out every day that really validates how important it is to use data to drive instruction. And as we're trying to get our students, particularly from the last year where a lot of students got behind, they didn't really do virtual school or they didn't have the support mechanisms, it's even more important than ever that we're looking specifically at data by student by student. So in this particular one, again, another template, and you're going to be doing this for your whole school. You are not only welcome to do this in a group, you are encouraged to do it in a group because it is a lot. But I will tell you, this is all real stuff. I haven't made any of this up. I pulled it from various sources that schools are supposed to do a lot of these things. This is part of a school improvement template or a data analysis process that they go through. So I'm giving you the actual real work from, it's sort of a hybrid from multiple school districts and systems. So in this one, you're doing this from a school perspective. So, if you're currently a classroom teacher, you're looking in that sort of microcosm of that. But for this one, you're going to have to kind of open and broaden your mind and your range here, and you're going to be looking at your school or a fiction school or a school you decide to use from your group. So you're going to fill in the basics into, sorry, I have this new office and my lights go off if I sit too still for a minute. So anyway, I'm glad y'all couldn't see me having to wave my arms like a mad woman to get my lights to come back on. So anyway, You're going to fill this out with your school basic information. What is the breakdown of your students in terms of male, female, by race, by ethnicity, by exceptionality? So how many students do you have that are gifted and talented? How many do you have that are second language learners? If you don't know what McKinney-Vento is, that is your students who are considered homeless. How many do you have with 504 plans, et cetera? Now, again, most states now publish and share this information, whether it's through a school report card or some other mechanism. But if you don't have the data, just put in A. But like I said, this is pretty standard information and data that, like I said, most school systems, districts, et cetera, are going to share with you. Okay. So then you're going to write a short narrative. Please don't give me a dissertation here, but what is distinctive about the school? Now, you know, a lot of times there's awards, there's a lot of things you can find off websites. If it's your school, you would obviously know some things that you think are distinctive or honors or what makes the school, you know, kind of stand out. That's what you're going to put here. Then you're going to tell me how effective is this school. So, you know, this is pretty simple right here. So I might say that I'll pick on my old high school where I was principal. MacArthur High School is considered a highly effective school as evidenced by the National Blue Ribbon Schools of Excellence Award, the Best of the Best honor from the Intel Foundation, the fact that we were rated an A school, you know, whatever. You know, we want a district championship, you know, whatever it is that you think is going to validate whether or not the school is effective. If you feel like your school is not effective, you can put that there too. How do you know? So give me some evidence to back it up. Okay, so I know that it's an effective school because blah, blah, blah. Or the school is ineffective because, you know, they have a D rating, whatever. Then what are your notable strengths? What are the areas that you think the school needs to improve upon the most? Okay. So how effective is your school in ensuring high quality achievement for students in all grades? So again, give me some information about how you think you're doing, and then here is how you support that. So how do you know? Those would be a great area to put some data points. Okay. In which subject and grades is improvement needed? And then what are you currently doing to improve it? So if we see too that there's disparities between groups, what action is being taken? So for example, it's pretty commonplace that our African-American children maybe are performing at a lower rate in writing than their white counterparts. Okay, so we know a lot about disparities. So you're going to tell me what the disparities are and then what actions being taken. What is your school doing to address the needs of your special students and your second language learners? Okay. How does your school use performance data to make adjustments? So, you know, we have weekly data meetings or we do data digs, you know, whatever it is that you guys are doing. Talk specifically about how you're using data. How effective is your school in providing a relevant and appropriate curriculum? Again, give me your opinion. How do you know? How do you know as well if there is alignment between the Common Core or the essential standards that your school is doing? And then how does your school ensure a broad range of learning experiences? Then you're going to go through the same thing about teaching, the quality of teaching instruction. So tell me where you think it is. How do you know? What are the strongest features? And then what most needs improvement? Okay, so like I said, I think this one's pretty self-explanatory. I mean, it's basically the same things. You know, how effective are you in this? How do you know? So give me some evidence. What's really working well there? And then what is it that's not working and what are you doing currently to improve that particular area? Okay. So like I said, I'm not going to go through every one of these, but that's pretty much it. Okay. And I do believe, let me go back here. I'm going to look again real quick at the Moodle course. Hang on, sorry guys. Keeps popping up all this weird stuff. That this one I did give y'all a sample on too. So let me share that with you just real quick. because I know I'm one of those people, I really like to have samples of things. It's easier to work from an exemplar sometimes than not. Okay, so you can see if you're like, I just really have no clue what this is all about, you can see here's an example for you. Okay. Okay, questions, comments, concerns about this one? Okay, going once, going twice. Like I said, this particular one, it's not really that you're doing a lot of deep dive analysis. It's really more a matter of you're just kind of looking at everything and giving me summary statements. And, you know, in terms of this particular assignment, you can do bullet points. They don't have to be paragraphs. And in terms of references, again, really the only references that I think you'll use would be wherever you're getting your data sources and your information from. So it's not necessarily the traditional APA style reference list. It might just be that, you know, it's from our school improvement plan, it's from the Texas Education Agency website, you know, it's from Louisiana Believes, whatever. Now, if you do go outside of that and you are looking at maybe some particular research summaries or findings, do list those as well. But typically it's just going to be tell me what your data sources are. Okay.
Where are we going to list those references at? Does it have a particular place?
Yeah, just on I think there's like a blank page at the end. Just list them there. And if not, you can just attach a separate sheet. Okay. All right. So we good? Okay, well, I know I'm going to break y'all's heart. If you haven't noticed, I did open up week 6, and I know you're really going to be brokenhearted, but there's not a discussion forum and there's not a reflective essay because I figure you're going to be doing enough of that just in completing the midterm. So anyway, you don't have to do those. And like I said, just please don't cheer until I'm off of the Zoom, okay? Because, you know, it kind of makes me sad when y'all do that. Okay. All right. So case studies due this week on Sunday, and then the midterm is going to be due on the 25th. And I will go ahead and show you, even though it's not open yet, I just want to do some more editing real quick. But let me show you real quick the final exam. So in week 7, there's also not a discussion forum or a reflective essay. And your final exam, let me see if it'll even pull up, guys, because I'm in editing mode, so it may not. Here we go. Just so you don't freak out about it. Sorry. Okay, so here's your final exam. You can do a PowerPoint, a video, or a paper. There are 10 comments. You cannot work in a group or 10 questions, excuse me. And like I said, I think, you know, I really want you to spend your time on the case study 1 in the midterm, and then your final is what have you learned? How are you going to use what you've learned? How are you going to apply it? That kind of stuff. Okay, so you shouldn't stress about the final because, like I said, I know I worked pretty hard when it came to case study 1 and to the case study number 2. Okay. All right. Questions, concerns, anything? Okay. Well, if you guys are in good shape. I will tell you, probably in week 7 too, I'll post the information on how to submit your assignment in TaskStream. You're actually going to submit both the case study number 1 and the midterm. So like I said, those will be your 2 assignments you post in TaskStream. We're not going to do the final exam in TaskStream. Okay.
I'm sorry, I have a question about that TaskStream. When I post or submit, you know, I think it's submitted, and then I go back and I think I'm leaving out a step. So
TaskStream and I don't like each other very much either. So yeah, I always have issues with TaskStream. If you run into that problem though, just once I tell you where to submit it and all, just let me know. They actually have somebody now on staff who is like the TaskStream expert. So I'll send you over to Dion and she can help you figure all that out. Because like I said, TaskStream hates me, sort of like Moodle does.
So one other question about that then.
Sure.
If we're working in a group, each of us submit the assignment?
Yes, yeah. So if you're working in a group, just make sure everybody's name's on there. But yes, each one of you will still need to submit the assignment because Moodle doesn't let me. I mean, I guess it does if I do a group work thing, but like I said, just because we also have to do this in task stream, it's just easier if everybody submits the assignment individually. Okay. All right. Let's talk a little bit more tonight about what's called informative assessment. So we're going to breeze through this because it's pretty long, and you guys can read. You don't need me to read to you, and I did include the notes here. But let's talk for a second about what is informative assessment. So we've all heard the terms formative assessment and summative assessment. You know, it's really important that when we are thinking about how do we know where our students are and how are they progressing in terms of their mastery of the standards, et cetera, we know that we have to use formative assessment, which is what's happening during instruction, as well as summative assessment, which includes what we do at the end, whether that's a test, a unit test, a project, whatever. Well, the idea behind informative assessment is that it's a process that students and teachers can use together to really adjust what they're currently doing. So it's not dramatically different than formative assessment, but I like the fact that when we call it informative assessment, the big change is that it involves students. We tend to think of as assessment being owned by teachers. So it's, you know, if I teach you something, you know, I teach a little bit, I'm going to test a little bit. So it's the idea that we're going along and, you know, the teachers are presenting lessons and things like that. And then they're going to do those quick checks or the exit tickets or whatever you want to call them to do a formative assessment so they know how to adjust instruction. With informative assessment, the idea is that we're going to do formative assessment and we're going to give those results in the moment to the students so that not only can the teacher adjust what they're teaching, but more importantly, the students can adjust how they're learning. So it's that sort of idea of self-analysis. So I'm thinking about my granddaughter last year when she was in 4th grade, and you know, they were doing virtual learning and all that. So she was having a little bit of trouble with her math. So, you know, I'm really good at math, you know. So I was trying to help her. Well, I didn't learn math the Common Core way. I learned math the old-fashioned way. So if I'm going to be doing some multiplication and division, I'm going to carry numbers and I'm going to have remainders and all of that. Well, with Common Core, she obviously had to do it very differently than the way I learned. So she was getting frustrated, I was getting frustrated and all of that. So what we did was we kind of slowed down and I began to have her to teach me the methodology. And then by using informative assessment as opposed to just formative, I would give her feedback along the way and with each step. And I would ask her, I would say, okay, how can you not only accomplish and complete the step, but tell me your rationale behind what you're doing. And the more we did that, the more she began to understand and master not only the mechanics of doing the math problems, but more importantly, the concepts behind it. So you see the difference between informative and formative. Formative is used by teachers to adjust teaching. Informative assessment is not only teachers using assessment to adjust their teaching, it's also students using the same assessment data and information to adjust how they're learning. So a lot of times it gets to that metacognitive sort of level where students are thinking about their learning and what that means. Okay, so we're not going to go through all this. Okay. I don't know if my video is going to work. It didn't earlier today, and I could not seem to get it to work at all. So maybe if you go into the PowerPoint, you can actually get the video to work. But it's basically a teacher who's talking about the difference between the two and when they implemented informative assessments, how it impacted and changed what teachers did, but also about how the teachers felt about the students' learning. So like I said, we unfortunately can't do that. Okay, so we know that formative assessment generates timely student achievement information, and it helps us to monitor where each student is, as well as our instructional effectiveness. Informative assessment takes it a step further. So it helps our students to know what did they learn or not learn, what can they do and not do. And then it helps our teachers to modify instruction or to reteach as necessary. Okay, so see the difference? Formative assessment stays with the teachers. Down here, it really becomes owned by the students. Okay. We also know that we use informative assessment to move students' learning forward, as well as to inform our teachers about how effective instruction is. You know, there's nothing more, I don't know, beautiful is probably not the right word, but more gratifying than when students can tell us exactly where they're struggling, okay? You know, oftentimes, and I'm sure you guys had this happen, you know, I remember being in the classroom and could see that my students were struggling with something, but they couldn't tell me where their learning had gotten off track. When we use informative assessment, the students can pinpoint exactly what concepts or sub-concepts within a particular content area that they don't understand. So we all know as teachers, we'll see gaps in students' learning, but think about the power of teaching and learning when the students can look at you and say, here's where I got off track. Here's where I began to not understand. Then we can really change instruction pretty substantially to get the students back on track, okay? So, informative assessment benefits our teachers because it helps them to determine the skills that our students know and to what degree they know them. It helps you to make minor modifications and create lessons activities for students that are more individualized and customized. So you could put, let's say that if you're learning, oh gosh, what's a good one? You're teaching your students how to effectively summarize. So using informative assessment, which may be, excuse me, like a pretest or something like that, you could easily regroup your students depending upon where they were in mastery of that particular concept or objective. And once you know that, then you can make different lesson opportunities for the students based on where they are. So maybe you have a group of students who really does know how to summarize effectively and they've got the bulk of it. But if you give them, let's say, a compare and contrast essay or a compare and contrast reading selection, they really struggle a little bit more. So I may have a group that's what they need to work on, is how do I summarize two conflicting pieces of information? Versus another group that doesn't understand really summarization at all. So I have to teach them a completely different skill set. Does that kind of make sense where we're headed? Okay. All right, let's keep going here. Whoops, too far. We also know that informative assessment benefits our students because they begin to take responsibility for their own learning. And instead of it being the teacher or the sage on the stage, the teacher becomes the facilitator or the coach. So, you know, I'm from Texas. So obviously, you know, high school football is king and I'm as crazy as many of them. I love high school football. And I remember when I had to let our former head coach go. We had a terrible record and it wasn't just about winning, there's a lot of issues. But anyway, so we brought in a brand new coach and a whole new coaching staff. And I remember one of the things that impressed me so much about the person I ended up hiring as the head coach was he was an amazing teacher first. And when we brought him in, they did a series of skills tests with all of the football players, and then they grouped them according to what skills they needed to work on. And it was really kind of this beautiful dance of how they were getting the students within their particular positions to master basic skills and concepts that the students had never been taught. And so it's that kind of idea. And, you know, you wouldn't think that you could get a bunch of 16 and 17-year-old boys interested in, you know, particular, I don't know, running or jumping or whatever it was they were doing. But because they could see their own growth and progress, and they knew exactly what the end goal looked like, and they were giving feedback and assessment every step of the way, it really motivated them to learn and become better. And obviously it worked, because we went from 0 and 10 wins. You know, the first year we had a new coach, we went to 9-1. The next year we were 10-0. And so this whole sort of snowball effect began to happen. It's very much like that when we do that inside of a traditional classroom. We have to think about what it is our students need in those little tiny pieces of a lesson or standard, as well as sort of the big picture, so they see where they're headed. Okay. So what are some informative assessment techniques we've used? Thumbs up, thumbs down. We do collaborative and cooperative learning. You can use poll everywhere. You can do think, pair, share. There's all different kinds of ways that we can use formative assessment with our students to give them instant feedback as well as the teacher. And that's just sort of a short list of a very, very long one. Okay. All right. So if we think about in terms of teaching being a continuum, and so the whole idea is that you want to have enough work presented that we can actually get some assessment data from it, but it also has to be a very high quality. So it is a continuum between the two. Okay. So we're going to keep going on down here a little bit, because like I said, we're not going to have time to do all this. So if we think about assessment in terms of tiers, so this is a nice little handy dandy chart that talks about where formative classroom falls in. So it's that minute by minute integrated into the lesson assessment that we have to use. Then we move into that interim or that instructional or evaluative assessment. And then of course, the summative assessment. So in very simple terms, formative assessment should happen multiple times during a lesson. Interim assessment should happen at key points within a unit. And then of course, summative assessment should happen at the end of a particular unit or concept building. Okay. So if you think this is just really interesting and you have nothing else exciting to do in your life, you may want to look at this book. It's called Ahead of the Curve by Thomas Geske. And he talks a lot about using assessments to really help us improve teaching and learning. I know as teachers, I think our instinct is that we spend a whole lot of time working on the lesson and the planning part of it, but we don't think a lot about how we're going to assess it. And Geske's premise in his work and research is that assessment is every bit as important, if not more important, than the actual teaching. Because if we don't have data, which we get from assessment, then we don't know how to effectively teach or to reteach or to enrich. So like I said, you know, this really is a really good book, Ahead of the Curve. And I know a lot of schools have used it very, very effectively. Okay. So let's talk about the differences between informative and formative assessment versus summative. So we know that informative assessment is carried out while learning is in progress versus summative, which is done from time to time and is a snapshot of what's happened. Informative is focused on the process of learning as well as the progress, where summative is, it's focused on the products. So notice the difference here. This is informative assessment is process driven. Summative assessment is product driven. Very, very different. And you'll notice as well that informative assessment is collaborative and fluid. And teachers and students both use evidence to make continuous improvement adjustments. Summative assessment, on the other hand, is very teacher directed. It's very rigid. And teachers almost become auditors. So, you know, if you think in terms of like a tax auditor or somebody, it's somebody who's looking and checking and trying to find errors or mistakes. Okay, so very different ideas and processes, both necessary, but informative assessment is where we get the growth for our students and make sure that we're teaching them to actual mastery. Okay. So if you don't know what UDL is, that's Understanding by Design and Learning. And then IFA is, oh gosh, I just totally forgot. It'll come back to me in a minute. Okay. So we can use informative assessments for self-evaluations to check misconceptions. We can do it as a think, pair, share, or a think, pair, share squared. And if you don't know what a think, pair, share squared is, just email me or ask me later. I think most of us know what that is, though. Okay, so remember, going back to those of you that may have had professional learning communities with me, Dufour, who's, I call him the godfather of professional learning communities. He talks about the 4 critical questions that we have to ask ourselves. So what do we expect students to learn? So that's the pre-planning. That's where you begin to think about what are those standards and objectives that we need our students to master. And then how are we going to assess it should also be part of that. How will they know how will we know, if they're learning? And again, that's where you look at and design assessments, both formative and summative. What will we do when our students are already proficient? So it's that differentiation of instruction. And, if you think about the learning continuum or even the RTI model. So if we think about response to intervention, we have the idea of the inverted triangle where, 95 to 98% of our students get good first instruction, they master the content. Then you have your students that they're tier 1. Then you have your students that move into tier 2. And those are students that maybe need just a little bit of reinforcement. So maybe a good reteach will get them where they need to be. And that's probably another 2% or so. Then we have our tier 3 students who need intensive help. So that may be students who really need to be referred for special education. They may need to go to summer school. They may need an extended day to be able to master the content. But oftentimes we forget about our students who need to be enriched. So they may already come in knowing this particular concept. And, if you were to give them the summative evaluation right at the start, they would not only master it, they'd do great. So for those students, we have to figure out how we're going to make sure that we're advancing their learning along the same continuum and not expecting them to just kind of sit back and wait while everybody else catches up. Okay. So remember too that you have to analyze these really important pieces to make sure you have appropriate goal setting, that you have a good planning and strategy development, that you're going to manage your information, and of course, figure out a way that you can actually monitor progress. And I think we're going to just kind of skip on close to the end down here. Okay. So let's talk for just a second about the balanced assessment system. So remember, I think the word assessment's gotten kind of a bad rap in the last several years because we have just sort of crammed the idea of accountability down everybody's throat. But really and truly, if we have a great assessment system, we know that assessment is an instructional tool as well as an accountability tool. Because they both are important, though, we have to put them in perspective and we have to actually balance them. So, I hear a lot of people saying, oh gosh, it's testing season, it's time to start our testing blitz. And I always kind of cringe when I hear people say that because, guys, we shouldn't have to do a testing blitz right before a test. We should have been doing a testing blitz all along. And when you've created an effective and balanced system of assessment, you're just doing it every day. That means you're doing good formative assessment. You're doing good summative assessment. You're using data to reform and inform instruction. So there shouldn't be this whole idea that we suddenly have to stop everything we've been doing and do a test prep couple of weeks. I think the best analogy is, you hear about college students who are going to cram all night before the test, and really and truly, they shouldn't have to do anything other than maybe just a quick review of their notes and their information, because if they've been studying the content all along, that cram session's going to do more to hurt them than actually help them. So it's that same idea and what it looks like. Also too, and this is like a whole nother discussion, I could talk for hours about this one, but the difference between assessing and grading. You know, and I think I've mentioned this to y'all before. Oftentimes grades don't really assess a student's knowledge and understanding or mastery of an objective or standard. A lot of times it's more a grade about, did you do your homework? Did you turn it in on time? Did you follow the right format? Really and truly, assessing gives us the true picture of where a student is. And that should be, whenever possible, reflected within their actual grades. Okay. So evaluative feedback can be, you know, very different than normal. So you have descriptive or evaluative feedback. You know, a check mark doesn't really tell anybody much, but when you give them some very concrete feedback, this is much more important and much more helpful. So for example, you can improve your writing by, or, you know, -3, that doesn't tell them anything. But when you take the time to make it truly descriptive feedback, then the students are able to take that and to use it to reform and inform their work. So again, goes back to DeFore's 4 critical questions. So what do we expect students to learn? We have to have clear learning targets. How will we know if they're learning? That means we're using a balanced assessment system. What do we do? What will we do when students are already proficient? So remember, it's that whole idea of thinking about enrichment. And then what do we do when students can't learn? That is when we bring in intervention, or some people would call it remediation. Okay. All right. So stop sharing. All right, in the last, sorry, I'm getting thousands of emails from my undergrad students tonight. So anyway, in our last 3-4 minutes here, what questions or comments do you guys have? Okay. Well, like I said, you're
one question.
Yes,
One
go ahead.
question. It's a simple one. How big of a group can we have? Like, is there a max number?
There's not. My only caution to you would be, if the group gets too large, you sometimes, it's kind of that idea of, if you break the assignment, let's say you had 10 people, I'm just kind of picking an arbitrary number, and you know, each person is going to do one of those sections. Just be careful. If it gets too big, you sort of lose the essence of the whole project, if that makes sense. Just because if you break it into such small pieces, you don't have the context of sort of the bigger project maybe, to really understand it and do well. I'll give you a great example. Like I told you, I've been reading grants, and there was a grant that we were doing our feedback on, and it's like they broke it up into pieces, and it was so discoherent. You know, it's like, oh, one person did this, because everything they talked about that should have flowed into the next section did not make any sense at all comparatively. So it's like you could tell it was written by like 20 different people, because there was no flow to it, and they didn't build on information that they should have. So that's my only caution. You know, so like I said, if you decide that you want to have 20 people, I don't care. That's up to you guys. Just be careful that with your final project that it flows together and makes sense. Did that answer your question, or did that just convolute it?
Yeah, that's fine. No, that's fine.
Okay. Anybody else? Going once. Okay, guys. Well, thank you. I'm going to give you 2 minutes of your life back. You didn't expect tonight. So we will see you next week. Next week is actually our final Zoom meeting, because like I said, we're almost there. So I've gone ahead and opened module or week 6, and I'll probably go ahead and open up week 7. I may do it this week. If not, I'll get to it probably Monday or so. I just want to do some more editing before I open it up for you guys. All righty. Thanks, guys. Have a great week and a nice weekend. We'll see you next week. Bye.